What is up, my gamers? We're back with another Brrr. What is up, my gamers? We're back with another beta patch breakdown. So, I didn't do one for the last patch, but I felt that this patch was quite exciting for me, given that they updated some specific cards that I've talked about in the past, and I wanted to do one for this patch. So, let's get into it. Let's start with the Ancient Relics. First, they nerfed the Brightest Flame card. They doubled the HP loss of the Brightest Flame card. I think this was either the strongest or one of the strongest Tez-Katara relics. Um, and doubling the downside of it does seem quite fair. Um, and it is a much bigger consideration. They have made some adjustments to the game, which make infinites quite a bit easier. So if you're going infinite with Brightest Flame, uh, you probably just insta-click it still anyways, or even if you're getting to like a pretty efficient loop. It's just there is a little bit more downside if you have an inconsistent deck. And they also nerfed Nono Pepe's Beautiful Bracelet. You can no longer choose which cards get Swift to. It is now random. This is very significant. I haven't played with this since the change, but this is really... Yeah, this can be such a brick. Because, like, sometimes you get this on your 3-cost power or something, and then one of your Swift 2s is just bricking. It's still probably pretty decent. Nono Pepe just has such good relics. That oftentimes Beautiful Bracelet's probably still the best option in some cases. But I do consider it less compared to the other options now, I would say. To quickly just go over the enemies, they buffed Axebots, they buffed Mecha Knight. This is on the damage that he's going to put the statuses on your hand. Not the actual turn that the statuses are in your hand. He's going to do a little bit of damage. So you can just put up a little bit of block. This is a really small number. It's not going to be problematic. Axebots get a little bit of HP. They do a little bit more damage. Probably not too problematic. General buffs to Ascension 8 and Ascension 9. Small increases to HP numbers. Not... This does change a threshold, kind of, because, like, they can deal 9 damage. They can take 9 damage per attack. So, 9, 8, 27. Any number above 27 means that it takes 4 attacks to kill them. Could be relevant. Just some very small difficulty increases for Ascension 9 and Ascension 8. And a little buff to Mecha Knight, little buff to Axebot. I don't think it's going to change too much about the fights. The Axebot's probably the biggest one in terms of difficulty increase, but Axebot's not too problematic at the moment, so I'm not too concerned. Alright, let's go over the changes to the colorless cards. They changed Rend from a 2-cost to a 1-cost, and they decreased the damage to compensate for the lower cost. Generally, I think this is quite a good change. Very notably, they did not do any change to the additional damage for each unique debuff, which is very much the design of the card and the intent behind the card. So I think this is a very good change to Rend. It felt like it was really hard to play at 2-cost, and I think this is a really good change. Splash was one of the strongest colorless cards at Uncommon, so it makes sense for Splash to go up in rarity to compensate for the strength of the card. It's still a very good card. I'm still taking it at rare. I think it's a pretty good change. Salvo has been changed from a rare card to an uncommon card. I generally wasn't taking Salvo, and I'm not buying a Salvo in the shop at rare, so making it uncommon feels like a good change. Retaining your hand is quite a strong effect. I just wasn't buying it at rare. It's just too cost expensive. You pretty much only got this card from colorless card generation before. So I think this is a pretty good change to the card. Moving on to Ironclad. They reworked Expect a Fight. So Expect a Fight no longer is an energy card. It is now a blocking card. So Expect a Fight now says gain 15 block, gain 5 additional block for each strength you have. This is a lot of block, and I'm quite excited to use this card more. Because 3 energy is a lot of energy, but Ironclad, they've made a change to Forgotten Ritual, so it's a general energy card now instead of like a specific synergy card. And Bloodletting Pyre. Ironclad has a lot of cards and ways to have energy on its turn, where you can actually play this and get a lot of block out of it. This is just a ridiculous amount of block, even with small amounts of strength. I think Expect a Fight's going to be quite strong as a blocking card. Forgotten Ritual no longer has the exhaust synergy requirement. I think that this is probably a change that I don't like. I expect they've made this change because they reworked Expect a Fight from being an energy card to a blocking card. So I think it's reasonable, but I think it's overtuned at the moment. I can see them nerfing this in the near future. We'll talk about it in a little second, but let's go into Rampage right here. Rampage, they've buffed the base damage and they've buffed the scaling very slightly. I think it's a good change, but I don't think it's like fundamentally changing how I feel about the card. Yeah, it's just an alright damage card at uncommon. Moving on. I can see the future. Alright. Seeing Red was a card in Slay the Spire 1, and a very good card in Slay the Spire 1. It was 1 energy, gain 2 energy, exhausts. And it upgraded to 1 energy, gain 3 energy, exhaust. Forgotten Ritual is currently 1 energy, gain 3 energy, exhaust. I can see Forgotten Ritual very quickly being turned into Seeing Red from Slay the Spire 1, which I think is fine. Like, Seeing Red is a great card from Slay the Spire 1, very good card. But I really did enjoy the exhaust synergy on Forgotten Ritual. So I can really only see 2 ways Forgotten Ritual can go. It can either become just like a really general, very strong energy card for Ironclad, like Seeing Red, or it can go back to the exhaust synergy. And of the two, I would prefer to see it back in the exhaust synergy. But I think it's pretty reasonable that they just turn Forgotten Ritual into Seeing Red. If they've removed an energy card and they want Ironclad to have better general energy cards, they'll probably just turn Forgotten Ritual into Seeing Red, and I think that's fine. But I'd prefer Forgotten Ritual to go back to its old exhaust synergy. It's just my preference, but it's also like I think it's better game design. I think it's a much more interesting card with the exhaust synergy. Now to get into the silent cards. They've nerfed Blade of Ink. The Inky enchantment no longer gives additional damage, but it still applies weak. I think this is fairly reasonable. A lot of the strength of the Blade of Ink card does not come from the Inky enchantment. Shivs just have a lot of synergies. Like, you get accuracy and all the other Shiv cards, and you just really enjoy getting cards that are Shivs. And 3 weak, like when you upgrade this, you get a third Inky Shiv. You're just applying a lot of weak. This is still a very good card. The Inky enchantment really didn't need to give additional damage, and it'd still be strong. Now, Mirage, I think, is in a pretty good spot right now. I think that when Mirage was not exhausting, at base upgrade, you could just take this, and then you'd have really reliable blocking, even with very small amounts of poison. I like that Mirage now requires an upgrade for it to be replayable in boss fights. So I think this is a pretty good change. I think Mirage is in a very strong spot right now, but I really like the design of Mirage and how this works out. So I'd like to see it kind of stay here. I could see them maybe like changing the rarity or something, but I think it's important for Mirage to be uncommon for like the poison synergy space to have like strong, reliable synergies, you know? So I like Mirage at uncommon and I like this. It might be a little strong at the moment though. And I things are allowed to be strong, you know? I think Poison for a long time felt a little bit lackluster, and I think recently it's felt very strong and good. And it's something that like you can really run into Aeon Glass, and it's something that the Silent can do in a lot of fights. I think it's good. I like Poison being strong. Now to get into region. They've reverted the alignment change, and along with it, let's talk about Guiding Star as well. They changed Guiding Star back to card draw next turn, but they've also reduced the star cost. These changes obviously go hand in hand because they want to keep, you know, infinites in check, right? They don't want to have, you getting energy and card draw on the same turn, just as like a little bit of uh infinite protection. Because like if they kept Guiding Star as it was, you'd have alignment Guiding Star Venerate, and you could just play alignment Guiding Star Venerate and go infinite, right? So this makes sense for the change. This seems pretty reasonable. Spoils of Battle, they've given a very slight buff. This is like just a small change, right? It's not big numbers, not big numbers. Just one little bump. One little bump on Spoils of Battle, one little bump on Refined Blade. Um I feel like a lot of the reason that you take Refined Blade is cuz it kind of feels like it's a free card. Like it's not like free, but you're like, you get a little bit of forge and then next turn you get some energy. Um in general, I don't think the blade feels as strong as the other two synergy spaces in Regent. It's very combo-y, and it's kind of bad in hallways, but it does become very good in boss fights because of the scaling on it. And you actually like boss fights last long enough for you to play the blade multiple times and get a lot of value out of forging. Um, So there's kind of like a balancing act of the forge cards being bad in hallways but being good in boss fights, where I take like a lot of the uncommon ones that are just kind of decent, like a bulwark or something like that. And a refined blade does get in the deck sometimes when you've got some bulwarks. Um, so these are kind of just minor number changes. And the Regalite nerf. Regalite was very strong at 6 block. This is kind of like just having a Psy, right? Because Psy is 7 block each turn. Regalite, you just play a card that makes you generate one card, and suddenly you're getting 6 block per turn. I think this is a very reasonable change. Regalite was just giving so much value, almost similar to a boss relic. Now, obviously, you don't get Regalite that often, because you don't get the class specific relics that often, but it was quite strong, in my opinion. Now to go over Necrobinder. They buffed the Shroud card, which I think is a pretty good change. And they've also buffed the Times Up card. Now, let's talk more about Shroud. Whenever you apply Doom, gain 3 block, upgrades to 4 instead of 2 to 3. This was just too small of numbers. Like, Necrobinder can't apply Doom enough times per turn to get like a ridiculous number of value out of only getting 2 upgraded to 3 block. So like this just felt really weak compared to Dance Macabre, the other very common Necrobinder block power. But obviously if you make all the block powers just very strong, you might run into some problems. So I think this is a good change though. This makes Doom a lot easier to play because you get a lot of block out of Shroud. Shroud becomes a much more reliable power in your defensive kit. And then Time's Up. Time's Up not exhausting is actually such a big change. This is a reliable damage source that you can do in a Doom deck, and you can just replay it and do a ton of damage over the course of a fight. Um, this feels like it might be a little bit overtuned. I haven't played with it yet, but I'm super excited to. Um, this might be a little bit too overtuned. We'll have to see. It still has retain on upgrade, so you can still, like, if you don't have a bunch of, I don't even know if I upgrade it now. I just kind of play it whenever I see it and do 50 to 100 damage every time. Grab it back with Grave Blast or whatever. Play it again. This is a kind of a crazy card right now, I feel. Seems pretty strong. Now on to the defect. Now, Hyperbeam was a card I've talked about in the past. And what I've wanted to do with Hyperbeam in the past is maybe change this to a status effect package. Maybe something similar to Immolate. But what they've done is actually something that a lot of the viewers recommended, where they made the focus loss temporary. And I think that's a great change. In Slay the Spire 1, you had a lot of ways to deal with the focus loss, and you could just kind of carry a Hyper Beam to help you around in the hallways. And now that the focus loss is not permanent, Hyper Beam, dealing 30 damage on Hyper Beam Plus, I think this is going to be good. You can just have this for some hallway fights. It'll help you out and take out a bunch of enemies. And you don't really have to worry about the focus loss if you don't take them all out. This is still pretty usable in the elite fights. The only issue is when you play this, you lose all your focus, so you can't really block with your frost orbs or whatever. But overall, this card is much more playable than it was previously. So I'm super excited to take it in a bunch of my runs and play around with it. The Thunder card change. This is quite a significant buff. Lightning orbs have always felt weaker than the other type of orbs in this game. And Thunder is quite significant to attempt to change that. So 11 damage on an evoke is kind of crazy. That's a lot of damage. I could see you getting a bunch of lightning orbs from random, or even like there's the power that whenever you play a power, you get some lightning. There are ways to make this pop off, so I could see this being quite good in a lot of decks. 11 is just a really big number, I would say. Yeah, that's just kind of crazy. The Null nerf feels very justified, I would say. Null just applied so much weak. At 3 weak on the upgrade, you don't have to worry about, like, you have very good weak uptime on your deck cycle with Null. And I think reducing it to 1 to 2 makes the card much less auto click, I would say. Because, like, weak is just kind of something that you see and you're like, I need weak, because it's just a bunch of block effectively. And darkness is already strong. So it makes sense to... Well, darkness is strong because the darkness card. Null becomes much less, you take it because it gives you a ton of weak, and then you get a darkness card, and then you just have very big damage dark orbs along with a lot of weak. So I think this feels a lot more balanced, I would say. And then the synchronize change as well. Synchronize used to be 2 focus. You gain 2 focus for each unique orb you have, and then it exhausts. Then they buffed synchronize so that it went to 2 to 3, no longer exhausting. And now they've changed it to 1 to 2, and it no longer exhausts. This kind of feels like, I feel like 2 focus for each unique orb you have exhaust is stronger than one focus for each unique orb you have no longer exhausts, but these both upgrade to the same thing. So it's very similar to a side grade. I think this is pretty reasonable for synchronize. I might prefer the old synchronize before patch 0.110.0. But I think this is fairly reasonable. It was obviously overtuned at 2 to 3 focus, I would say. Now to kind of summarize my thoughts on the patch, I really like the Hyperbeam change. I think this is a good change. I think this is really balanced too. I think this is a good place for Hyperbeam to be. Uh, Kind of just a good card to take in hallway fights now, and you can. This is playable in elite fights. This is sometimes playable in boss fights. You don't get to block with your frost the turn you play it. A decent number. I think this is good. Forgotten Ritual. Uh, I feel like I missed the synergy space for it. I can just see this turning into Seeing Red, and getting nerfed pretty quickly. Um, I'd like to see this reverted back, but I could see them just turning this into Seeing Red, and that sounds pretty decent. I wouldn't hate them for turning this into Seeing Red. It's a good card. Um, and Time's Up. Dude, that's a crazy change to Time's Up. Doom kind of needed some help though. Doom wasn't that consistent, and I think having Time's Up just kind of be a crazy card now makes it very pickable, and I'd love to play with this, you know? This is just a really exciting card, is what I would say. Like, I love when your card is just crazy, you know? And you're like, is this balanced? I don't know, dude. But it's gonna be fun to play with. Thank you all for watching. Do you guys think that my opinions on the patch are pretty reasonable? Is there anything you guys are sad about getting changed in the patch? Let me know. You know? Um, yeah. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all next time.